welcome back. It's almost hockey season. This is the Reporter's Corner. I'm one half of your co-host, Jared Rubado with the Bemidji Pioneer. With me is the other half of the co-host, Trent Singer from Sioux Falls Live. Trent, how are we doing today?
Doing good, Jared. Just like you, just getting through these dog days, baby.
Yeah. It's time for hockey season. It's 95 degrees in Bemidji today. I need to be in a hockey rink where I can complain that it's too cold. So, I think a good place to start is, why are we doing a podcast in the middle of August? Well, Trent and I had the brilliant idea that is not so brilliant and probably should have been done, that we're just doing a check-in with every team. So we're bringing on a media member or two, or maybe an online personality member or two that are associated with each team in the CCHA. And now that rosters are almost finalized, most of them will be finalized by mid to late August. I think we kind of are starting to get into the area of the summer where we can look at what the CCHA is going to be for 2025-26. So we started today with Augustana. We brought on David Brown, who is the play-by-play host. You've heard him on the CCHA Show with Perry, our overlord Perry, a few times. And he's great. And we did an hour. We did an hour long with DB. And if you like Augie hockey, you're going to love this. If you love 2016 Augie basketball, you are going to love this. I cannot recommend this enough to anybody who was there waving the Augie flag in 2016 when they won the national title for D2 basketball.
It's funny, too, that we started off with that, but I think it's actually an interesting precursor for what has now become Augie hockey. It's going into year 3. If they don't have that success in the late 2010s with softball, baseball, basketball, football. If they don't have that success, I don't know that they venture into this D1, sport in hockey and really kind of give it a shot. Right. A lot of that does set up kind of what Augustana has done and their ambitions as an athletic department. It was a lot of that was a precursor from what they experienced in those late 2010s. And obviously we know that they had goals to go D1 in every sport. COVID really set them back in that regard, and a multitude of other factors have kind of set that back. But, here we are. They're going into year 3 with this hockey program, and David Brown could have been a better person to have on for it. The guy knows his Augie hockey and just has such a great insight into this program.
Yeah, DB was awesome. So much knowledge of Augie hockey. We joked with him a little bit that he might be the only media person in the country who actively writes down the line chart and tracks them game to game for one team. He is so detailed, and I think that really showed in this kind of preseason chat about Augie hockey. And there's a lot to get into, right? We went through strengths and weaknesses. We went through, potential breakout players. We talked to him about the league as a whole, who he sees as the top 4 teams come March, as teams that he sees as the most likely to have home ice advantage. We even tried to get him to make a few predictions that he didn't want to give, but you can kind of come to your own conclusions on the things you may have been hinting at there. So it was a really, really fun chat, and a really insightful chat about Augie hockey that goes beyond just the novelty of, hey, look at them, they're new, look how cool it is that they're good and they're new. It's really a deep dive into Augie hockey and what they were last year, what they expect to be this year, and where they can go this year.
Yeah, diving into the context of the league now too. We talked a lot about that. Obviously, we kind of fired off our own takes and our own sort of perspective on how Augustana fits into this conference this season, really as full members now, because they'll be playing a full schedule this season. This is the first season they're playing a full schedule. To catch you up a little bit, they didn't lose a single player to the portal. They did lose 7 players, 6 graduates and 1 who's left the team. I really like what they brought in, though. They're really, I think, leaning on that consistency factor. And Jared, we talked a little about the penalty kill. We talked about the power play and maybe some of those special teams aspects that have been kind of a weakness. I see that naturally getting better this season when you talk about bringing guys back from last season into this year. I remember in year 1 talking with Garrett about penalty kills and power plays and maybe even some of the teams that they were going up against who were really good in those aspects. And he was pretty blunt about it. that's stuff that doesn't happen overnight. It's stuff that builds over years and years of consistency. I remember Omaha coming in on year one when they were playing at the Denny Sanford Premier Center before Midco Arena was built. And in that inaugural season, Omaha just owned them. And it was with areas like special teams. It was with the penalty kill. I mean, you saw a lot of really systemic offense, out of the Mavs in that series, and a lot of that is just really having veterans, having guys who have been around and have been in the system for a while, and I think that's going to play a huge role for this team this year. We'll see. I mean, it's really hard to kind of project what that looks like, but I don't see how that takes a dip. I think they're only going to get better in special teams this year because of that consistency.
And ironically to that, I think DV gave a really good counterpoint as to where they could maybe be on the same playing field or even a tad worse with a big weakness for Augustana. This isn't just a hype up Augustana or a hype up Minnesota State when it's their turn or Northern Michigan when it's their turn. I mean, I think we get it kind of down to the nitty gritty a little bit in some of these chats too. And DB laid it out that there are some big shoes to fill, and there are some glaring weaknesses that could persist after a really, really good 2024-25 season that maybe could have prevented it from being a great 2024-25. So, it was a great chat, and let's kick it over our interview with David Brown.
Welcome back. We have another episode. Really a man who needs no introduction. He is the voice of Augustana hockey. He is Sanford's AI pitch bot. He is.
I've never heard that one before.
He is the man, David Brown. And David, you've been doing this for a while. We kind of want to just kind of start these off a little bit by just kind of getting to know sort of your involvement with Augie, how it all kind of came to be. I know you've been the only voice for Augustana hockey since it started, but why don't you fill us in a little bit? How did you kind of get going with this gig?
So first of all, thanks for having me on the pod. Got to make sure I say that first. So I started at Midco Sports back in 2012. I was originally at Kellerland News in Sioux Falls from 08 to 12 out of college. And then from 12 up until recently, I was full-time with Midco Sports, doing play-by-play, did a lot of NSIC stuff. That's where I got to really know and learn about Augustana. Did some Summit League stuff, did some stuff with South Dakota State, South Dakota, etc. And then layoffs happened in April of last year. I was part of the Midco Sports layoffs, but they brought me back as a freelancer. So my last full year at Midco, I was the inaugural season voice for Augustana hockey just because of my knowledge and relationship with the school. And then after they laid me off, they said they still wanted to bring me back as a freelancer. So I did that again last year. And then I guess a spoiler alert, hasn't officially been announced yet, but yes, I will be back for the third season of Augustana hockey. Doing all the
Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go.
Bring it in. No, David, obviously this is a program near and dear to you. We want to get your perspective. I could babble about this team all day, obviously, but you have wonderful, wonderful perspective. And for those who don't know, no one takes better notes than David Brown. If you need to know who the third line player back in October 27th was,
yeah,
David's got it.
I'm sure it was cold and freezing or something like that. I do keep track of lines throughout the season just to keep, top six. Sometimes it means something, sometimes it doesn't, but you just like to notice, okay, why, this guy's getting more time in the top six. This guy's been moved down. Maybe they're shifting some things. So yes, as much as you joke, that is part of my preparation, is seeing how the lines change every week.
Oh yeah.
How did you get involved just with Augie Sports from the get-go, right? I mean, when I went to Augie from 2014 to 2018, it feels too long ago now, but how do you, I remembered seeing you around, not just at Augie, but around Sioux Falls and stuff. So, but that was, just talk to us about how you got initially involved with Augustana athletics.
So, like I mentioned, I joined Midco in 2012 and was doing just sort of a little bit of everything. And then back then, when there was a little bit more investment in the original programming side, they actually had a weekly half-hour show on the NSIC called the Northern Sun Experience. and I got picked to host that show. So for, I think, 3 seasons, I think it was 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, I did a weekly NSIC show that aired on Midco. And when I say weekly, I hosted it, I wrote it, I produced it, I edited most of them. But it was a labor of love for half an hour a week. I would get highlights from all the NSIC schools. I would try and shoot as much of my own stuff as I could. And this is on top of doing play-by-play most weekends, too. So putting that together was interesting. We actually did 100 episodes. I'm sure you guys saw at least half of them. No, I'm kidding. Very low numbers. No, I'm kidding. There was a shift more toward live broadcasting in 2017. But to get back to your original point, Jared, I got really super involved in the NSIC. Obviously, got to know a lot of the SIDs, a lot of the coaches, and all the different schools. And obviously with Augustana being in our backyard here in Sioux Falls, just got to know them really well. Went on road trips with Tom Billiter and Dave Krauth when Augie's men's and women's basketball teams were doing really well. Went to the national championship in 2016 down in Texas. That was probably one of the more fun experiences that I've had in this capacity. But getting to know Augustana over the years, it kind of started there. And then obviously that knowledge and that relationship helped when they decided to start a hockey program.
Yeah, I one more on that too. I mean, that's an incredible period of, 14 through 17, essentially, to be involved with Augie Athletics, because not only do you have, that group of men's basketball players that won a national title, they beat Iowa in that exhibition.
Yep.
They somehow traveled to Duke and played for an exhibition. A great group of guys too. I lived with 2 of them.
Which ones did you live with?
Marcus Asmus and Steven Schaefer. So
they were like the 7 and 8 on that national championship team.
They were buried on the depth chart behind much.
They played though.
They did.
That's how Billiter did. He had those depth teams though.
Yeah. They'd roll out that group of 4 seniors, and then it was a point guard, Jordan Spencer from the UK, who was also there. And then they got John Warren from Hopkins. We are going way too deep into basketball and hockey podcast.
I need to tell one story once you're done, but you can finish.
But on top of that, then you also had CJ Ham, Trey Hyde, Matt Heller on the football team, which was Trent. They'd throw for like 500 yards a game.
Right.
CJ Ham was, before he became the Vikings fullback, was a halfback, and he also was a thrower for the track and field team as well, and broke a few school records as a thrower, which probably lent more belief that he should have been a fullback from the start. So, and then obviously baseball had a big run in there. Softball,
2018 national champions.
Yep. Volleyball was always in the mix. It was a hot time for Augie sports in the NSIC.
All right, one quick story about the men's national championship team. I promise I'll make it quick. So they win the Elite Eight, or they win the region. They go to the Elite Eights in Frisco. Me and a bunch of the local media are traveling down there. We get down there the morning of their Elite Eight game, and we hear Dan Jansen, who was the D2 Player of the Year, suffered a freak injury during practice. They don't know if he's going to go. And we're like, oh my goodness, did we travel down here for them to just lose, and we're going to get on a plane right away and go back to Sioux Falls? So their Elite Eight game, they reseed. They're the number 2 seed. They're playing the 7 seed, which is Tarleton State, whose campus is like hours away from Frisco, Texas. So it's a very partisan crowd. Augie's down its best player. They somehow win. And so then it's like, okay, it's the major league mantra. Might as well win the whole damn thing after that. Yeah. So Jansen comes back for the Final Four game. He's clearly not 100%. He comes off the bench for the first time, I think, ever, or at least in the last couple years. Has his Willis Reed moment. He scores his first 3 baskets. They kick the crap out of Western Oregon, beat them by like 30. Yeah. And then national championship, I think they only played 6 guys the national championship, but Dan played it up. And so, we were wondering about that foot injury. And you can deduce your own conclusions, but let's just say a month and a half after he played in the national championship, he was still in a walking boot. So they worked some magic there.
I had a few friends, because it was during our spring break, so a few friends made the trip and drove down to Texas. And when they found out Dan Jansen wasn't going to be full go, it was pandemonium in the group chat. I mean, panic button was not only on top of the table, it was being smashed over and over again, because without Dan Jansen, Augie's not winning anything, and that's certainly what it felt like. But it was a memorable year to be in college, that's for sure.
That was a fun team. That was a really, really good team.
And it was a team that was gritty. They could win in any way. If it was going to be a rock fight, they'll win it. You want to play in a shootout, they'll win it. Like, but don't give me. They'll still lose a midweek game to like Winona State in there, because that's.
Oh yeah.
That was always, you were always due for one of those.
It's the NSIC, man.
Yeah. Well, Coach Billiter likes to tell the story that you mentioned it earlier. They beat Iowa in an exhibition game. Jansen hits a buzzer beater to win an exhibition game at Iowa. Yeah. And then a week later, they lose to Washburn in some rinky-dink gym in Vegas in some pre-season tournament. And then they only lost one game after that. I think they lost at Northern during I Hate Winter Week, when the crowd up there goes bananas. And they had one slip up, and then they didn't lose again.
Yeah, great. It's fun. But this is a hockey show, and
sorry.
No, that is 100% my fault. I do have one more question, because when we do this with Alex Micheletti, because he's coming up next for one of these shows, this is just going to be how much I didn't like Mankato when I was in college. So we'll just do the reverse end of this. But I do want to ask, because I mean. You do a lot of play-by-play for a lot of different sports during that time. Was there any a big adjustment going from hockey, doing high-level D1 hockey, learning the ropes in there, and just talk to me about that process for a little bit?
So I was fortunate. Alex Heinert, who still does North Dakota hockey for Midco Sports.
Awesome dude.
Awesome, great guy. Fantastic at what he does. Better human being. Alex Heinert's awesome. And his brother Paul's my boss, so I'm just not saying that.
I was about to say, you're only saying this because you work for Paul.
No, I've known Paul forever. I've actually known Paul longer than Alex, but no, both of them are great. So when CBS Sports Network got the NCHC games of the week, and Alex was picked to do those, he was going to miss a couple of UND hockey games. This is back in the winter of 22, so the 21-22 hockey season. And so at this point, we didn't know anything about Augustana hockey, but I said I would fill in for him. And I say this, and it's North Dakota hockey. Didn't tell anyone. Had zero hockey play-by-play experience. None whatsoever. And I'm
make it till you make it, baby.
Why not throw myself into the Lions then for just a school and a town that takes hockey very lightly, that takes hockey just one of those things that's just part of. No, I fully knew what I was getting into. I self-critique myself. I was terrible the first period. I got much better after that. I ended up doing 4 games. And broadcasters understand this, just every sport has a different rhythm and a different cadence. And so you can know as much or as little about hockey as you want, but until you know the rhythm and the flow, it's really hard to do. And so once I figured out the rhythm and the flow, and honestly, I think having those games under my belt gave me the confidence to, be okay, once Augustana started its hockey program. And, I can fully admit in between, I interviewed for the Gopher hockey job back when Bally Sports was, I think, now it's FanDuel Sports, but back when FanDuel Sports was Fox Sports North or Bally Sports North, I can't remember what it was at the time, but I've had opportunities to do hockey. And so that gave me confidence, and, doing Augie hockey these past few years and doing hockey games on a consistent basis has really helped hone in my skills. I'll never say I'm, fantastic or great, but I feel I do a good enough and a decent enough job now that I've done so many hockey games.
I'll say you're fantastic and great. It's fun tuning into Augie hockey when I'm stuck up here and it's negative 30 degrees and Bemidji State's on a bye. So, yeah, no, you do great work. And, but let's get into the hockey stuff, right? Augustana's got a pretty anticipated season. Is that fair to say, Trent, that this is maybe a season that comes in with a little bit of expectations after last year, after their first full year as a CCHA member?
Yeah, I think, you could expectations start to be applied from the outside, right? But I think Garrett Rabin will always tell you the same thing, that the expectations internally are a different kind of beast in a lot of ways, right? they don't really go in with expectations. The expectation is just to continue to get better. And with the way this team is trending, you got to think that the expectation is just to build on an 18-win season.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you can look at this in just a very, that they like to use, the hashtag and the slogan, "We hold the pen," because they're writing their own story. And this sets up as a pretty good chapter 3. Chapter 1, the first season, like, you're getting your feet wet. Nobody knows anything. It's an expansion team for all intents and purposes. You hope, I think heading into that season, you hope you win a couple games. And they had double-digit victories, and they tied Denver and won the shootout in their 5th game in team history. Then you go into the second year last year. They expedite the CCHA process. They join the league a year early, still have to play the half schedule because the schedules had already been made up. And so it was still a little bit of a weird year last year because they used percentage points instead of, total points to determine the seeds for the Mason Cup playoffs. But they ended up as the 2nd seed based on percentage. So you saw them go, I think, from 12 wins year 1 to 18 year 2. And now it's year 3. And I think, for lack of a better term, the novelty has worn off. They're another NCAA hockey team. They have a full schedule. All their non-conference opponents are NCHC teams. So, no offense, but you're not playing the Lindenwoods or the Fairbankses or the Long Islands of the world, the Independents. You're playing legitimate non-conference competition. There's a full CCHA conference schedule. And now you have a couple years under your belt to where, okay, we're a regular hockey team that has expectations, but now we are just like everyone else. There are no more, I guess, special circumstances surrounding this team, if that makes sense.
For sure. And I want to kind of get into some more team specific questions, David, and get your take. I mean, we'll start with the first one. They lose 7 guys. Obviously they're adding 7 more this offseason, 2 transfers, 5 freshmen. Which player, I mean, you look at this lineup, which player do you see being the points leader on this Augustana team?
I think it's going to be a battle between Bischoff and Meerman. I think those two will more than likely be on the leadership team, whether one of them wears a C or an A, it doesn't matter. And I think Augie needs both of them to step up and be points leaders, for lack of a better term. They're both juniors. Bischoff famously scored the first goal in team history, and he is their leading points returner. Him and Meerman are their leading points returners because Luke Mobley and Peyton Matsui have graduated. So I look at Bischoff and Meerman as a couple of guys, they're both juniors, as a couple of guys who have had periods where they've been really, really special. I think Meerman's one of the most creative guys with the puck, period. I think, him on a power play, like, he sets up on the power play about as well as anyone that I can remember. And then Bischoff just has a wicked shot. Like, if you get him in open space lookout, he's had a couple rockets his first 2 years that whiz by you, like that. So I expect those two in particular. And then maybe one guy, not necessarily under the radar, but who I think is primed for a breakout year, is Colton Friesen. He's a Division III transfer, going to be a senior this year. I think he has shown the grit. I think he's probably one of their grittier players, if that makes sense. Like, someone who's really not afraid to, get down and dirty, so to speak, but also is shifty enough and moves well enough to be a consistent points leader, to be a consistent goal scorer. So Bischoff, Meerman, and Friesen are the 3 that I'm looking to step up in particular this season.
I want to focus in a little bit on one of them, and it's clearly the guy who I think is the captain this year, and that's Hunter Bischoff. I mean, I think Jared and we joked about it a little bit last year during the playoffs. Tom Serratori has Jackson Judding. Well, Garrett Rabwin has Hunter Bischoff, and he is never short of great things to say about Hunter Bischoff. He loves Hunter Bischoff, and coming off the season he had, though, David, I mean, he took a big leap points wise, and that was a thing that Coach Rabs was really, really hoping to see. I know they had a lot of double digit points guys. They had depth scoring throughout that lineup, but Hunter Bischoff came up with some really timely goals and some really timely, key situations. So I'm just curious to, what about Hunter Bischoff's game really stands out to you?
I think when he first came in, Rabs described him as like, he's just hockey all the time. Like, it's that cliche, eats, sleeps, breathes hockey. Like, he's very focused. on the game when it's time to focus on the game. And you're right. I think there's a certain clutch factor with him. Honestly, my favorite game last season, Trent, you remember this. They're down 3-2 to Lake Superior State, I think with like 2 minutes to go. They get a power play goal, and then like a minute later, Meerman finds him on kind of like a back pass from behind the cage. And I don't know what kind of defense Lake Superior State was playing, but Bischoff had like a cone around him, and he just rocket fired. And so they scored 2 goals in the final 2 minutes to win that game in regulation. But there's that. He scored a power play goal, or he scored an even strength goal coming out of the penalty box. It was like really good timing where the puck glided by him as he left out of the box and went forehand, backhand against Michigan Tech late in the season. So I think he has a certain clutch factor. I think he loves the moment and recognizes the moment, but he's also humble enough, to defer to teammates, not hype himself up too much. And I think that's kind of a prototypical Garrett Raboin player, is a guy who can do a lot of things really well, has the ability to step up, but also doesn't take himself too seriously.
I want to throw another name out there that I think probably deserves a little bit to be in this conversation as maybe the points leader this year. When I look at this roster and I look at Nase Langus, I see a kid who, once he found his footing in college hockey last year as a freshman, everything just clicked, and he became not only a reliable player for Augustana, but he became a player that opposing teams had to essentially look out for, a player that they had to game plan for. And I think a lot of that is because he is a bigger kid, and he does play with a lot of speed. But he had 16 points last year in 29 games, and I think a lot of his point production came in bunches. But could you see him as a guy who maybe a dark horse candidate to step up, and we could be looking at him with 25, 30 points, come March next year as they head into the Mason Cup playoffs?
I think Rabs would love that, and we can get into that later, if he can have someone score 25 to 30 points. But you mentioned it with Nase in particular. He's just a big body, and I think probably the biggest thing you mentioned is points came in bunches. Well, one of those bunches was the end of the season. He scored points in 6 of his last 8, including the CCHA quarterfinals. So you look at someone who's ascending, played with Slovenia in the IAHF World Championships. Obviously, took a lick in there, as Trent and I have joked about. You get on the ice and all of a sudden Sidney Crosby's right in front of you, and, and that's kind of a mind trip as well. But you look at Nase, did well toward the end of the season, bigger body, and perhaps most importantly was a key component of their power play. And we can get into the strengths and weaknesses a little bit later, but power play is an area where I know Augustana wants to improve. So if Nase is just a sophomore, can be a consistent part of that unit, absolutely he can be a big component for their success this upcoming season.
David's a mind reader here.
Because strengths and weaknesses is where we're going to next. So let's talk about them. From your point of view, where do you see this team's biggest strength and their biggest weakness heading into this season?
I don't know if I can pin it down to just one. I will say probably the biggest one is goaltending. There was a stretch where Josh Kotai, I think it was a 13-game stretch, he didn't give up more than 2 goals. I think it was from Thanksgiving to the end of January. Did give up more than 2 goals in a game. Augie, I think, went 9-1-3 in those 13 games. He wasn't bad the last month of the season, but the standard had been set so high that it kind of tailed off just a little bit toward the end. Because, for a while there, Alex Tracy's obviously phenomenal, but there was a real debate on, is Kotai or Tracy the best goalie in this conference? That was a legitimate debate, especially in, December, early January. Kotai still finished top 5, I think, in the nation in save percentage and goals against average. But knowing that they found a goalie, because that first year it was really trial by fire. They stuck Zach Rose out there because he was the veteran. They let Kotai get some work. They let Caden Hargreaves get some work. Last year, Rabs made it a point, we need to find our goalie, our guy, night in and night out. And they found it with Josh Kotai. He started 31 of their 37 games. I expect the same this year. I think that's something that they can build on. If you have solid goaltending, then you can figure out other components of your team. So I think goaltending is probably going to be their number one strength heading into this season. And then I would say it's kind of, I don't know if it's cliche or kind of nebulous, but just this is a gritty team that really likes playing for Rabs. We can get into the transfer portal stuff, but they didn't lose anyone in the transfer portal this year. And if you look back at the first year, they lost 2 guys. One of them was Brian Silver, who played 4 games, didn't have a point. The other was Ethan Perot, who didn't even play, had some off-the-ice issues, and left the team. So in the 2 years, they have not lost a single point to the transfer portal specifically. What does that tell me? Rabs is a great coach. He keeps guys engaged. The team has completely bought in. Even guys who didn't put up the greatest stats last season, who maybe you think, maybe they'll look for an opportunity elsewhere, they didn't leave. Some of the guys who barely got any playing time did not leave. And so I think that says something about Rabs as a coach and how he motivates these guys. And so their ability to be gritty, to stick together, and to compete, I think that, along with Kotai's goaltending, are their biggest strengths heading into this year.
I think, too, you look at, like, to go back to that player retention part, which is it's obviously huge for Augustana, right? I mean, you made a great point where you don't lose a point in the portal each of the last 2 years. You're doing something right in terms of player retention. But when you even pull back the curtain a little bit more and you see the opportunity for some kids to maybe leave, find a spot on a team that plays in a bigger conference or plays in a more high level program or a program with that blue blood reputation, there are plenty of double digit point returners. I mean, Easton Young, Hayden Hennon, Joey Del Greco, Tyler Hennon, Hunter Bischoff, Colton Friesen, Brett Meerman, Owen Bond, Nase Langus, and Owen Baumgartner. I mean, that is an insane amount of double-digit point returners that are coming back to this team. And depth is ultimately the most important thing you can have come March. And this is a group poised to have some of the best depth in the CCHA.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned Hayden Hennon. He probably is a candidate up there for that leadership team as well. Just too much focusing on forwards. We got to focus on the defensemen now. But I mean, Hayden Hennon, he was in Flames development camp last summer. I believe he was in LA Kings development camp this past summer. 6'3", 6'4". I mean, just he's everything you want in a defenseman. And the fact that his younger brother Tyler, who originally wasn't even supposed to be part of the team last season, but they had a late retirement to one of their transfers, so Tyler got brought up a year early, but Tyler acquitted himself very well. And I think the fact that both Hennon brothers are solid contributors is going to be great after a year of experience. But Hayden Hennon in particular, I think, is one of those players that he probably could have gotten an opportunity elsewhere. I don't know any specifics about that, but based on his level of production and what he did during the offseason, I have no doubt that teams were looking at him, but he's still at Augustana, and that's a great thing for the Vikings.
Well, and it's I think a lot of it too is his profile, right? I mean, he's a 6'3" defenseman. He's got the size to compete at this level. He's a guy I see taking another step this year. We've talked a lot about what we like about Augustana, David. What are some weaknesses though? Because I don't think we've really touched on those too much, and I know that they're there. I mean, this wasn't a perfect team by any means. I have my own take. I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
There's one glaring one from a numbers standpoint, and as simple as it sounds, it's face-offs.
Yes.
They are, for lack of a better term, they've been awful in the dot, in the circle. They didn't finish last. They were 8th out of 9 teams, but I actually looked this up because I wanted to mention it. Augustana was the only team in the CCHA that did not have 2 skaters win more than half their draws. Luke Mobley's faceoff percentage was .509. He was the only guy on Augie above 50% for draws.
And it killed him. It killed him.
Absolutely, it killed him. Every other team in the league had at least 2 skaters that had a draw percentage above 50. And as stupid as it sounds, sometimes gaining the puck and having possession of the puck makes all the difference in the world. You're not on your heels as much. Augustana's penalty kill is great. Part of the reason it's so great is because they've been on it so damn much. I mean, it's one of those deals where you kind of you learn how to be a good PK unit because you're always in a 4-on-5 or a 3-on-5 situation. So there is so much individual skill on this Augustana team. Just a ton of good players. If they have the puck, they're going to have so many more opportunities. As simple and as dumb as that sounds, if they can win in the draw at a more efficient clip, like, they can be the best team in the CCHA. And Trent, you and I have talked to Rabs about this. They've had practices where they've just focused on faceoffs. Like, it became that much of an issue at certain points during the season. That to me is the number one issue. The number two is what you alluded to a little bit earlier, Jared. I think they want and are hoping for a guy to break out and be a 25,
Absolutely.
30-point guy.
Yep.
I remember after the end of the first season, Reb said we had a lot of good players do a lot of things really well. And then after the end of last season, he's like, we had a lot of good players do a lot more good things a lot more well. But their points leaders were at 23 points. I think they want a 30 or 25 to 30 point guy. There are certainly some candidates. Hunter Bischoff's a candidate. Meerman's a candidate. Joey Del Greco's a candidate. Langus, you could go down the line. But they didn't have that superstar, quote unquote, like a Rhett Pitlick for Mankato last year or a Liam Malmquist for St. Thomas. Do they necessarily need it? You could debate it either way, but I think they want that quote unquote superstar. They want someone to emerge and be the guy.
I think that's a great point too. And when we talk about the guy too, I think the guy can come in a lot of different forms, right? Like, let's look at Bemidji State last year and a guy that Trent already brought up in Jackson Judding. He was the guy. He didn't have 30 points last year, but when they needed him to win a faceoff, he was the guy out there on the draw, taking that faceoff and oftentimes winning that faceoff. When they needed a goal, how often was it Jackson Judding delivering that goal, right? And yeah. I do think that's what Augustana was missing a little bit, was when you need something, it was, well, let's see which guy can get it instead of looking for the guy or the couple of guys or this line to get it. And that is something where, and when you look at a guy like trying to replace Luke Mobley, in a lot of ways, he was that guy last year. Just, he had his 20 points. He had some really, really big moments. When they needed a big face-off, he was that guy, but now he's gone. So who takes that spot? And it, like you said, Dave, it comes down to one of the guys that we've already mentioned. It's poised, but on the flip side, there are so many guys on this team, poised to take that step and emerge as that guy. And look, if you have 3 or 4 of them who look like they want to be that guy and are producing like that guy, now you're in a spot where, hey, look, we might be in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and a great point about Luke Mobley. There were periods last season where he was the guy. I think that's the virtue of being a captain. Luke Mobley, fantastic kid, super nice guy. I don't know if it was necessarily super nice to a fault. I'm sure he was a great leader and a great captain, but I think he would admit this himself. He wasn't a rah-rah type of guy. He was very much a lead by example kind of guy, loved to play the game. But you're right, he did come through with some clutch goals last season. And then I think Peyton Matsui is probably the one. I think they're going to miss Peyton Matsui more than Luke Mobley personally. I think Peyton Matsui, the transfer they brought in from Fairbanks, really established himself as that glue guy. Like, hey, if I'm one of the 5 on the ice, I'm going to calm things down. I'm going to make sure guys are where they need to be. I'm going to make sure that I'm in position to do well and others are in position to do well. I'm pretty sure, he did lead them in plus minus at plus 17. So if they can find some consistency, and that also comes with experience too. So when we say there are a bunch of candidates who can maybe take that leap and be the guy, I think you're banking on what they've learned these first 2 years.
One guy, you've mentioned him a little bit, but I see him as being one of those guys who could be sort of a breakout player. I'm curious to kind of get your take on it. I mean, early in the season, Joey Del Greco showed all the signs, and then I wrote a story about him, and he kind of went silent a little bit, and so I feel
the singer curse
for that. Yep, a little bit. But Joey picked it up. He found a little bit of his stride there in the latter months. Again, he had a little bit of a dead period at the start of the new year. Following December. I'm curious to know, is he maybe the guy who steps up? And I mean, in a lot of ways, he's got the same build and plays a lot of the same style as Peyton Matsui. How do you see him kind of elevating?
I do think he's a candidate, and one of the main reasons is because Rabs was talking about him before they'd even played a game year one. Right. He was so excited about Joey Del Greco's potential down the line. Obviously he was focused on that inaugural season team, but just in casual conversations, he mentioned how excited he was for Joey Del Greco. And I got numbers to back up your point, Trent. He had a 7-game point streak. And then after you wrote your article, he went 13 of the next 14 without a point. And then he got points in 4 of his last 7. So it was very much a hot, cold, and then hot again. So
Right.
But that's a freshman. So he's going to be a
Yep.
sophomore. I'm sure consistency will come a lot better. I'm sure he knows the rigors of a college hockey season at this point, but he is incredibly shifty. I think he's one of their more elusive skaters. Like him and Meerman and Owen Bond are some of their faster, more elusive skaters. But I think of those three, Del Greco's the best scorer of the bunch. And so I think, yeah, he certainly has the capability to be a 25, 30-point guy and kind of emerge here in his second season.
I want to just throw in there that the Singer curse might just be a forum curse, because I wrote the Yuri Vizinin feature right before the Augustana series. I think he didn't have a point for the next 10 games. I wrote a Matthias Scholl feature, and then they got swept by Northern Michigan at home and Ferris State at home. So, look, it's a common problem for us forum.
If it's a plea for us to stop working as much, I mean, I'm not gonna like argue against this. You know, like, take some weeks off during the winter. Let's jump into a little bit from the addition side. I mean, they like I said, we've gone over it. They didn't lose a guy to the portal. They graduate 6 and have one goalie who is now gone in Caden Hargraves. But they've added some pieces. You talk about 2 guys in the portal, Cole Birch from Ferris State and Samo Maritati. I'm probably not saying it right.
I was going to say we need to talk to Andy Thurston to make sure we get these pronunciations, because we are going to butcher the hell out of them right now.
Absolutely. He comes from Providence. Great size. I mean, I believe he's a 6'3", 6'2" defenseman from Providence.
What I saw. Yep.
Yeah, and then obviously they had some players, some freshmen as well. 2 guys from the USHL. One, our first Sioux Falls player to play for this team, and Landon Fandel. I believe he graduated from Roosevelt. Probably didn't graduate from there. He attended Roosevelt and then graduated.
Sioux Falls
graduated high school in juniors, correct? But yeah, so he comes from Tri-City. Jacob Jestris. I'm not even gonna try that.
Jastrzebski, that was my guess.
Jastrzebski. Yeah, that sounds good. Why am I trying this? Like, this is all.
See, it's more important for me. You just have to spell it correctly. I have to say it correctly.
He comes from Des Moines. They've got a guy named Leonid Bogagov. I think Grabs is just messing with us at this point. He's from the Null. Max Chakrabarty from the SJHL, and then Colby Hay, who comes. I guess they played 10 games in the ECHL and will play at Augie this year. So I'm curious to know of that group of 7 players. You know, which of those do you expect to have kind of the biggest impact right away? A pretty clear answer, I think, for me.
Yeah, and it'll probably be the same for me too. You know, I'll be honest, don't know a lot about the incoming freshmen in terms of how they did in their respective junior leagues. So I'll focus on Cole Birch just because he's a known commodity. Ferris State transfer, as you mentioned, led the Bulldogs in assists and total points. That's a huge get when you can take someone else's leading point getter. And I think they needed him because they expect him to be a top 6 guy and be in that dot and be that circle to improve in terms of face-off percentage. I don't have his exact numbers in front of me. I don't think Birch was excellent necessarily in the circle, but I think he was probably a lot more consistent than a lot of guys Augustana had last season. So I look at Cole Birch as a very strategic addition. I fully expect him to be a top 6 guy. I fully expect him to be among their leaders in minutes this year, just because of the resume he brings, the fact that he knows the league, the fact that he played, for a gritty team in Ferris State that I can't remember what seed they finished at. I think Ferris State, were they the 6th seed or 7th seed? I can't remember.
6.
6, yeah. So, but there were periods where they looked like really, really good last season, especially like late January, early February. They looked really, really good. And what I noticed about Birch, I think they want him to be a similar impact guy as Peyton Matsui was last year. Because if you remember last year, they didn't bring in a lot of transfers last year either. It was just Matsui and Owen Baumgartner. This year, only 2 transfers in Cole Birch and Sama Maritati. So I think Rabs is strategic on using the transfer portal as a tool, but not a crutch. I think he's very selective, wants to grow this program with freshmen, but if there are key guys he can add in the portal, he's going to do it. And Baumgartner was excellent for Augustana last season. The problem was he was hurt most of the year. But in the spurts that Baumgartner was on the ice as a defenseman, I thought he really acquitted himself very well. He was a bit undersized for a defenseman, but he was a tough SOB. So I think Birch, in particular, is this year's Peyton Matsui in terms of overall impact for Augustana.
Do you have a series that you kind of circled on the calendar for this year, one you're kind of licking your chops at for Augie hockey?
It's tough just because you don't really know until like a month or so in. I think they have a mid-December home series against Minnesota State Mankato. I think that because they finished 1-2 last season in the standings, I think that's going to be a great litmus test for where they are right before Christmas break. They have an interesting schedule. They have 3 straight home series in December, and
Yeah,
so
it's wild.
It's wild. And there's a period between like mid-November, mid-January. They only go on the road one time. So that middle portion of the season is really going to determine a lot about how their season goes. If they are able to, rack up some points and rack up, a good place in the standings before, things really start to be like home road alternating in January and February, they'll be in a good spot. And right smack dab in the middle of it, I think it's December 12th and 13th is when they host Minnesota State at Midco Arena. And that'll be the first time that the Mavericks are in Midco Arena. They played the last home series at the Denny Sanford Premier Center in Augie's first season. So it'll be Minnesota State's first time in the barn. I'm just interested to see how Minnesota State rebuilds, reloads, whatever you want to call it. There's obviously been a lot more moving and shaking among other teams in this conference compared to Augustana. But I think that's going to be a really good litmus test mid-December is Minnesota State. And then because of the schedule, they only have to go to Mankato and play one game in Mankato because of the schedule. And I think the alternate for them is they have to go to St. Thomas for 2, and then St. Thomas only plays 1 in Sioux Falls. So only 3 games total against the Mavericks and the Tommies, but 2 of them will be in Sioux Falls, and that's mid-December. That's the one I think I would look at as the early litmus test.
All right, well, finish this sentence. Augustana will have a successful season if blank happens.
If Josh Kotai is Josh Kotai.
Ooh. Okay.
I think that they have proven they can win with depth scoring. Now, can they take the next step? That's the ultimate question. Because we all know, and we've discussed it, Rabs wants someone to step up and be the main guy. But he found Kotai last year. Kotai was consistent. I think he ended the season with a GAA under 2. Again, had a good middle portion of the season. Didn't necessarily fall off, quote unquote, toward the end, but just wasn't as effective as he was in December and January. But now he knows the rigors of going through a full season too. Oh, go ahead, Trent.
Well, no, I mean, it's so simple. It sounds so simple, but you're absolutely right if you really think about this. I mean, let's look at Josh Kotai's numbers because, like you said, 31 games he played. I mean, he carried the load in net last season. There was only a few he didn't play. 1.92 GAA, a .936 save percentage, a 17-10-3 record. He had 3 shutouts. I mean, if he does that again, it's hard to say that this isn't a successful team, right?
Yeah, and again, he was good the entire season. He was otherworldly from Thanksgiving till the end of January. I don't think they need him to be otherworldly. I think they need him to be in between otherworldly and where he was at other portions of the season. Just a more consistent guy, which is crazy to say about a guy who finished top 10 in the country in saves and shutouts and goals against average. But a lot of that was chunked into that middle portion of the season. If it's consistent throughout the year, to me, it doesn't really matter if Augustana has a 25, 30-point guy if Kotai gets even better in net.
I like that answer a lot.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. DB, we're going to ask you a few league-wide questions here and really put you on the spot for, make you say some takes here about the CCHA.
Oh, boy.
I want you to give us your top 4 teams, the teams that right now you're eyeing as the teams with home ice advantage. And you don't have to order them, but you do need to pick the number 1 overall seed.
It's tough.
It is tough.
Admittedly, part of my summer process, and I found out a couple weeks ago that I was going to be doing the TV broadcast again. So I went and I have a process where I update rosters. I, finalize the stats of the previous year, make new rosters for the next year. Some teams have their full rosters listed already, others don't. So again, this is based on mid-August projections. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Number one,
I'll
say Minnesota State again.
Yeah.
I'm
probably going to stick with you on that too.
Yeah, I know
Really?
that. I know that's a little bit of a but I think the conventional wisdom was they were going to have to go through a rebuilding phase, um, under Luke Strand, and that just didn't happen. Like they're as good as they were in previous years. So they obviously lose some guys. They lose Pitlick. They got him for 1 year as a transfer, and he was phenomenal. But they still have Alex Tracy. And as much as we've talked about Josh Kotai, Alex Tracy was the player and the goaltender of the year in the conference. And like I said, they were kind of neck and neck in terms of best goalie in the CCHA for a good portion of the season. By the end of the season, it was clear Tracy was the best goaltender in the conference, and he's still there. And cliche as it is, if you have great goaltending, it makes up for a lot of other parts. And so I would still put Minnesota State number one. As far as the other in the top four, I'll be a homer and say Augustana just because I think they will continue to progress. I know the percentage points gave them the 2 seed last season. We'll see how that plays out when they actually have to play each team multiple times this season. I would put them in there. I'll put Michigan Tech in there because they got a nice little return gift after they thought they were losing someone to UND. So I'll put Tech up there, and then the other one in the 4 spot, I'll say St. Thomas. I know that's kind of boring, but I think them. I'll say the wild card, and this is just off of all the hubbub online. I'd say the wild card is Bowling Green and their supposed number 1 recruiting class in the country. If those guys hit, then they're going to be a force.
I believe that's fallen a little bit since then. That was like, first of all, I thought it was funny that was all touted back in June or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't even know that the CHL ruling had changed at that point, right? Or guys hadn't really made commitments at that point. So
I think that was before the CHL ruling. So
it's totally changed. They're not the number 1 team. And I'm with you.
Yeah.
Right. I'm with you in the sense of like, I don't know how you can take Minnesota State off the top of the mountain until they are taken off the top of the mountain. They do lose 17 guys. I mean, I totally understand it. And I'm not like super confident about having them as the number 1 team. I'm giving them their due, right? Like they earned it last season. And I say they're still the number 1 team. I think St. Thomas is I think they're right up there though. I really love what they've done this offseason. I'm with you on that. Augie's one of those fringe top 4 teams as well. And I personally, I like Bowling Green. I really do like their recruiting class. I put them right up there. Probably them and Tech are 4 and 5 again, probably.
I'm not on the train of Minnesota State being number 1 going into.
Okay.
Oh, I know you're not. I know you're not.
I think it's clear, like pretty clear to me that it's St. Thomas, and it does go back to the turnover that Minnesota State is going to have to deal. Like there has to be some bumps in the road. And look, credit to them if they don't go through those bumps in the road. But even with the uber talented freshman class, the outstanding transfer class that they're bringing in, along with the returning pieces, I just think that you look at St. Thomas, who had a little bit of a similar offseason with less turnover. Now, granted, they're going to have to figure out what their goalie tandem looks like this year. But they add Carson Musser from Colorado College. He's a very touted goalie. You bring back Wallen. You bring back a lot of guys who have been in those big spots, and they're a team that's now eligible to make the NCAA tournament. I love where St. Thomas sits going into this year with kind of. I think too, when you could list any 4 teams you want in the top 4 of this league, and I think there's a clear flaw in every one of them. And, Bowling Green's an example of that, where they did bring in a very older recruiting class with a lot of CHL kids and a lot of kids who are ready to make that jump to college hockey. But what does their adjustment period look like, and what do they look like without Christian Stover? That's a point for Bowling Green right there. What does Michigan Tech look like with their turnover, running new systems with a new coach, losing players in conference? Right? I mean,
yep.
But yeah, and the last one for you, DB, because you already kind of touched on your sleeper team there. But how many teams out of the CCHA make the NCAA tournament this year, and which team is it? Or which teams, I should say.
It's probably just one. I just don't know if there's going to be enough. I think it'll take time, and what's going to be interesting to see over the next couple years, not just this year, is how the CHL ruling is going to impact leagues like the CCHA. Because I think we all agree, I think this helps the CCHA versus other conferences. Because I think other conferences will always find that top talent, but now having that pipeline opens up doors for CCHA schools that are maybe toward the bottom of the standings to get some better, more experienced kids in there. I just don't know if there is enough depth. Now, to be fair, Augustana in particular, with a strong non-conference schedule against only NCHC teams, that will help in terms of pairwise. But it's hard to imagine more than just the Mason Cup champion getting in. I won't even make a prediction. I know that's a cop-out. I just can't make a prediction on who's going to be that team this year. Because I could take the homer way out and say Augustana continues their ascension and makes the NCAA tournament in its third year in existence. I could say they reach the championship game and lose a heartbreaker to St. Thomas or Minnesota State, which is maybe the expected route. I don't know. Or maybe it's Augie just winning a playoff series. Who knows? But I don't think you can legitimately make a definitive declaration now. I think once we know everyone's full rosters, it might be better, but I will say I just don't think they're going to get more than one team in the CCHA.
And a lot of it's going to hinge on the teams that these Northern Michigans, these teams that were at the bottom of the conference being better than they were, lifting up the conference with their out of conference schedule, right? I think Ferris takes a big step personally.
That was going to be my other sleeper besides Bowling Green. Ferris.
I mean, you just really look at kind of what they've added. Obviously they bring in a new coach. There's new energy around the program, and I don't know that that's so much a bad thing. Bob was a legend and was who he was. In a lot of ways, Ferris State is like the most intriguing team in the CCHA because there's no way we can determine what that team looks like this season. I can't put him in my top four, and I can't really put him in the bottom four, right, or the bottom five. So teams like that, Ferris State, Northern Michigan, Bemidji State in life after Matthias Scholl. What does that look like? Like if all these teams that were kind of already, saying, we're not sure what to make of them, they're at the bottom of the league, whatever. If they elevate this conference, there's no surprise if you do see two CCHA teams end up in the tournament. I mean, it all really depends on the league as a whole because those games have to matter.
And a lot of it, too, will depend on how the league as a whole performs in non-conference. I mean, last year, a really, really big step forward in non-conference play across the board, right? Yeah. I love this, this topic, though, of where, prospecting where teams are supposed to land because, like you said, Ferris State is extremely interesting this year. And you touch on Bemidji State. Where do they go post Matthias Scholl? Well, they replaced him with the WHL goalie of the year. And Bemidji State had the only kid drafted out of the CCHA this year. And yet I think there's a true lane for them to finish 6th, 7th, or 8th again this year. But would anybody really be that surprised if a team like Bemidji State, Ferris State, Lake State with the Milburn brothers and Rourke Appleby taking a step forward, if one of those teams sneaks into the 3rd, 4th spot in this league come March and they just put it all together? Tom Serratori loves to say anybody can beat anybody in this league, and a lot of it ends up feeling like coach speak in so many ways of, this is a deep league and everybody can beat everybody. But this year really does have that feel to it where there's so much unknown going in that anybody can list the order of these teams going into the season, and you could be wrong about every single one of them.
How about this, David? Is that emblematic of college hockey as a whole right now, though? I mean, just with this new CHL stuff?
I don't know if you're necessarily going to see it play out this year, but I think in the coming years, you are going to see a level up in terms of schools that are maybe prototypically thought of as, the bottom of divisions or the bottom of conferences be more toward the middle or maybe even ascend to the top. I think this year is going to be the big litmus test. I don't expect a whole lot of moving and shaking, but to Jared's point, like if Bemidji's draft pick hits and if their goaltender's hot, who knows? We could see BSU as the 2 seed. We have no idea. It's a lot of moving and shaking parts with this new ruling, and I think the CCHA is going to be the good litmus test for how that actually plays out. Because then you have teams like Augustana that didn't really go that route, and then you have teams like Bowling Green who did go that route. And so, what's the right formula? I think everyone's just trying to figure this out. It makes it fun. It makes it exciting. It makes it hard to predict, but I think we won't see the true nature of that ruling until maybe 27 or 28.
I'll also throw into that too. I mean, because the CHL discourse, especially online, is chaotic to say the least. I mean, you have fans complaining that their teams didn't get enough CHL kids. You have fans complaining, maybe not even complaining, just banking on the fact that their CHL kids are going to be immediate impact players as freshmen. I've talked to a handful of coaches in and out of the CCHA, and all of them kind of share the same sentiment that maybe we should come into the season with a little bit of caution about the expectations for CHL players right away. Even the most touted CHL recruits were playing against 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. And now they're playing against 20, 21, 22, sometimes 23 and 24-year-old kids who are bigger, stronger, faster, and play under more structure and have had more time to develop. Even for some of the most sought-after CHL kids in and out of the CCHA, for some of them, it's going to take time. Some of them, they're going to get it right away. And they're going to look like absolute pros and look like the kid that they were recruited to be right away, maybe even earlier than expected. But it is going to be a big adjustment. And for a team, like Bowling Green or like a Bemidji State, who is bringing in a handful of CHL kids with the expectation that a lot of them are going to play right away, maybe those expectations from a fan perspective should just be dialed down a little bit.
Yep.
We don't know how that adjustment is going to look. I mean, we're talking about kids who would play 60 to 70 games in a year, and they'd be lucky to get in a practice once every 2 weeks. What does that look like for them when they practice 4 times a week and they play all their games on weekends? And that workload, that game style workload goes from 60 games to 40 games. It's a lot of it's development focused, right? How does it change the structure in how these teams play? Does it give a CCHA team a little bit more versatility in the style they can play in? But DB, you make a really good point that the CCHA does feel like the conference that is going to be the litmus test, because we have to remember that the CCHA coaches as a whole were the biggest proponents for the CHL kids coming into college hockey. And it's 4 years like this one and the year after that and the year after that to see how much better the league can get as a whole if the recruiting pool opens up by another 1,000 players. And it'll be really fun to watch.
It will. And you mentioned talking to a lot of coaches. I remember before the ruling happened, I think I asked Rabs just kind of casually offhand, this wasn't for an interview. I was just honestly just trying to get his thoughts, what he thought about it. And it wasn't really an opinion one way or the other. It was more of a shrug the shoulders type of thing from what I remember. And I think you see that emphasized with the fact that it's a lot of young freshmen coming up for Augustana and 2 transfers. I think that shows that different teams are approaching this in different ways. What is the successful formula? And is your success measured by where you finish next season or where you are consistently as a team in the seasons to come? Hypothetically, let's just say Bowling Green finishes above Augustana this year in the standings. Does that mean Bowling Green's approach was the right one? Maybe for next year, yes. But then look at it afterwards. Does Augustana continue to be a top 4 seed, have home ice in the CCHA for years to come? Or are they going to have to adapt and say, you know what, maybe we do need more CHL kids to compete in this league? That's why I think it's going to be very fascinating and what we referred to as the litmus test, because Bowling Green, Bemidji State versus the Augies of the world who didn't use any CHL kids, who aren't going to use any CHL kids this year, what's the correct formula? And I don't think you can answer it after this season, no matter where they are in the standings.
Well, and just to piggyback off that just a little bit, one thing I think that leads him to answer the question that way is why deviate from a model that's already shown that it's working? I mean,
100%.
unless you run into a roadblock where obviously it's not. And I also think that he's recruiting a type of kid, right? Like he played college hockey. He's lived it pretty much his entire life since he started playing college hockey. He knows he's trying to recruit a certain kid that fits at Augustana, that fits in the classroom. There's a certain style of kid that they want, and they're not looking for people who are exclusively these hockey players. These are still student athletes. And he's a traditional guy, I think, when it comes to stuff like that. Like he's totally not going to deviate away from really what he believes in, right? And so I think that's a lot of it too. He has to build pipelines too. I know obviously Taylor Nelson is from Canada, and there are some avenues in that route. But you still got to build that networking, and all of his networking is in Minnesota. So you see a lot of those guys still coming.
I think another point on top of that too is like for the teams that did dip heavily into that CHL pool, like the Bowling Greens, the Bemidji States, right? Dennis Williams is recruiting guys that he feels will work through his CHL coaching experience.
For sure.
In the college.
For sure.
Tom Serratori is recruiting that same model of player. I think he's just doing it in a way where it's maybe less of a recruiting battle to get him instead of having to do it out of the NUL, out of the USHL, out of the
Yep.
Right? Ultimately, the CHL infusion for the CCHA should just prove as another way for the teams to stay competitive, another way for teams to find those players that fit the model they look for. And, obviously time will tell on a lot of these, speculations, but I think it's not a rash assumption to believe that the teams that have the best mix in their old and new recruiting approaches to that style are the teams that are going to find success right away. How much do we lean in the CHL to fit the model we play? Or maybe we don't dip our toes into the CHL because what we're doing out of the USHL and the NUL works. And, hey, maybe a little bit here, a little bit there. We find some kids in Europe, call it good. And that's the best way we need to build a team, right? So there's not going to be one way to be successful in college hockey. If anything, there are more ways to be successful now than there were a year ago or a year before that.
Yeah, and the CHL pipeline just adds a different way to win. And to go back to Trent's point, I've mentioned this, in conversations with you guys and with others and on different podcasts. I'm not shilling for Augie, but they could not have picked a better head coach in Garrett Raboy because of exactly what Trent said. He was a walk-on at St. Cloud State who became a captain. So he knows exactly what it's like to be the low guy on the roster and to be one of the captains and be one of the elite players on the roster. He has relatability to every single player on that roster. And that's something kids can buy into. His youth obviously helps him. I think he's, late 30s, early 40s. That plus what he went through as a college hockey player and knowing kind of, to Trent's point, he kind of is more of a traditionalist, has a little bit of an old school mentality. And, we're all similar in age to Rabs. And so I think we appreciate that about him. And we'll just see if that ascension continues in year 3. Year 1, he had to get half his roster out of the transfer portal. They win 12 games. Last year, 2 kids out of the transfer portal, they win 18. This year, only 2 kids again out of the transfer portal. Do they get to 20 wins this season? I think that's probably the magic number they're looking to see if they can grow to. So I think that part of it in particular is fascinating when you take into account the entire landscape of college hockey and what is the right way to build a program.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff, David. Well, we won't take up too much more of your time. We definitely went longer than we wanted to. But this is great.
You warned us about that earlier. We might go longer.
I did.
Of course, the first 10 minutes was about hoops. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
My
we may
apologies.
need to let Perry know. He'll love that. But no, we appreciate you coming on, man. Obviously hockey season's really kind of right around the corner, and I know you're excited. We're all excited for it to get here, but you're a busy man. We appreciate you taking the time to come on here. I know you got to get back to work and find some more stories for me. So,
hey, it's past 5 o'clock now. I don't have to do anything right now.
Well, we appreciate it, David. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you guys for having me. Love it.
All right. Once again, thank you to David Brown for joining the show. Subscribe to the CCHA Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And subscribe to the CCHA on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Trent Singer and at Jared Rubado BP. You can check out our work at BemidjiPioneer.com and SiouxFallsLive.com.